Sophia, say hi to the camera.
Hello. Say hi.
I found that a lot of people don't know why you should stretch. I mean, you hear that it's important and mobility and warm up and blah blah blah, but what exactly is it that I need from pre-workout stretching? Well, for calisthenics and gymnastics types of skills, stretching the shoulder muscles is important. And stretching the rotator cuff muscles is especially important. And the rotator cuff muscles are not a myth, are not some sort of a voodoo muscles that are just there and are worked whenever something else is worked, and thus should be just worked as one unit with the compound movements. Well, they are recruited and that's their job, to stabilize. But do you know, whenever you feel your shoulders starting to tighten up in overhead mobilities, tighten up in internal rotation and external rotation, it's exactly that. Whenever you feel your shoulder starts tightening up, usually one shoulder more than the other, it's a rotator cuff issue. If it's, and I feel tightening up in an inflamed way, so in an injury context type of way. If a pec and lats feel tight, they usually just limit range of motion. When a rotator cuff feels tight, it's more of a sharp pain because it's deep muscle groups. It's not and it's small muscle groups, so it's much more sharp and precise than what a pec major or lat tightening up would feel. So my warm-ups usually include some form of stretching internal rotation, external rotation, abduction, flexion and extension, stretching the shoulders all the way. Usually if you'll find in this particular stretch that one shoulder is tighter than the other, as you see right here, my right shoulder is tighter, usually that will be the one. Here I can get all the way to the ground, as I did with my left arm. Usually this one, the tight shoulder in this particular stretch, would be the one that hurts or has higher risk of injury, especially the supraspinatus, what is also referred to as the impingement, shoulder impingement. Usually the shoulder that also clicks if you press your arm just free overhead. I'm not a zealot, a mobility zealot. When I was introduced to calisthenics, gymnastic strength and mobility, through movement training, I just worked movement, I just worked mobility in a 1-to-1 ratio with handstand. So I had a lot of mobility work to do. About 3 to 4 hours a week of mobility, just on mobility. And I didn't have a mobility goal. The goal was just to get more mobile in many different directions. But as I developed my own practice and direction with my physical being, I come to learn that mobility is something that I think that is needed for your strength practice. So to support your strength practice as not as a main goal in it of itself. So I couldn't get myself to, let's say, get a middle split for the sake of middle split. Okay, when I get it, since there's nothing thrilling about the middle split, the moment I will get it is the moment that I will put it on hold, maintenance, or stop practicing it altogether. So why bother, really? Instead, if I value a full ass to grass squat, if I value overhead press and one-arm chin-ups, I practice mobilities to support those movements. That includes stretching thighs, stretching all sorts of stretches, the Cossack squat, stretching hip flexors, stretching the rotator cuff muscles, so to support overhead practice. Otherwise, over time, those muscles get used and accumulate fatigue and tighten up. So I do mobility work to support the strength work. I don't do mobility work anymore just for the sake of mobility. And I believe that strength work in it of itself should be also viewed similarly. So you do strength work to support your movement in daily life. So there's always a bigger umbrella, right? Today we have handstand push-ups and we have one-arm chin-ups. So bent arm, overhead day. warm-up sets for the handstand push-up and one-arm chin-ups. Warming up with floor handstand push-ups and mixed grip chins. Whenever you hit a PR, a new max, you are tempted to keep pursuing that best lift, one repetition. But in reality, it's everything that you did leading up to that single new personal record, new best, that brought you to this record. Being high volume, high repetitions, the rest of the exercises, accessory, supplementary movements. You must not forget that, but you will get tempted to try and PR and work max effort and work heavy singles all the time. Because currently you're seeing a lot of success with that. But that's sort of a phenomena that might mislead you from what actually got you there. So whenever you hit a new personal record, a new best, it's actually the time to dial back down and do what you did to got there. So for me it's high rep sets. For me it's sets of 5 to 10, building a lot of volume, something that is sustainable, whilst singles have their place. And always in strength training programs, you shouldn't overuse them, you shouldn't abuse them. They will create a lot of fatigue, and high volume sets, they feel well, they feel nice on the body. So we have everything set up right now for full range handstand push-ups with the plates, and we have the pulley one arm chin up with the 7.5. So enough to get me around 5 reps per arm, which is really fatiguing with the one arm chin ups. I find that you can't really practice in that 6 to 10 rep range almost. Not as effectively. Let's go. Molly, would you keep an eye on your sister when I'm doing the set? תחכו לי. Okay, so with the one arm chin-ups, I adjusted the volume for sets of 4, which is more realistic this day. You will have to adjust if you want to advance in training. You have to adjust. You have to accept certain scenarios. In the past, I used to do regardless of how I feel, until I tick the mark in my brain and I shut that noise down of you must complete it in spite of your sharpness, how you feel that day. And I think that in the long term, it's actually, you are not building the right tools to be the mature advanced practitioner, which is work with the general strength training principles, commit, be consistent. As you see, I showed up. I stretched regardless of how I felt, woke up at the same time, and I'm here. But from this point on, I must adjust. On good days, I will take advantage of my performance. On most days, I will simply cruise. And on bad days, I have to adjust. So today, adjusting means sets of 4, although my expectations were sets of 5. And for me, it still serves the purpose of this volume training. Once you bring, I found, the intuitiveness with the general strength training principles, you'll be at your best. You'll break over the long term. You'll break what's possible. You'll break your potential. You'll exceed your potential. And usually it makes sense. Usually you can go back and find the reason why you are not as sharp that day. For instance, yesterday I had a leg day. Squat. It's not a leg day, it's a squat day. We're movement pattern training, not muscle group. Either way, it was a squat day, and I also added wide pull-ups, about 5 to 6 sets of 15 to 20 repetitions. So it's not one arm chin up directly, but obviously it works overlapping muscle groups. It makes sense that I'm not as sharp, that I feel the elbows slightly more today in the one arm chin up in the pulley assisted OAC than usual, that I'm not as fast, that the lockout is slightly harder today. Every weakness is exposed. It makes sense because I worked a different pull-up variation yesterday. Although higher reps, although wide grip, it's similar, it's overlapping muscle groups. Usually you can find really the reason that why you're not as fresh today. And if you're smart, that's what you'll fix for the next time. Not your attitude in that session. Hardworking athletes usually complete the work. I'm not afraid of them, as I acknowledge myself as a hardworking athlete. I will rarely have the problem of not attending a session or not trying to reach my working sets and working weights or body weight progressions. For me, most of the difficulties, obstacles will be acknowledging how I feel, inserting intuitiveness into my training and adjusting as I go along. For me, adjusting in my brain, I don't have that elasticity. As I said, I previously just had to shut that voice in my head that told me to do what I had to do regardless of how I feel. Short term, it will reward you. Long term, not the best approach. as I advance in my physical practice, I found that I actually use less and less sophisticated training methods. Those training methods used to mask, manipulate my performance so I can complete what is prescribed regardless of how I feel. And this is a long process. We're talking one-arm chin-ups, handstand push-ups, full planche, whatever is your goal. We're talking years of accumulation of training. You can spread the stress over 4 years long. So how much do you really expect per day, per session to advance? How many repetitions? How much weight should you add? In reality, it's almost negligible. You should practice the movement and add. That would be ideal when your body feels like it can perform with the speed, with the technique. And in reality, what we do, and we add weight, we add reps in sacrifice of speed, in sacrifice of technique, just to make that bump and hopefully not injure ourselves, hopefully re-grab technique and speed as we go along. But the best thing is actually if we just had an empty barbell and we lift that and we didn't really know how much weight was on the bar. So we go by feeling. That's the idea of RPE, right? That was the intent behind RPE or RIR, reps in reserve. And the idea is great. The application, the execution is problematic for most practitioners. So it's very hard to implement RPE and RIR into training unless we're talking elite level athletes, 10 years under the belt plus. Handstand push-ups, sets of 5 to 10. Anything will do today. I acknowledge that it's not the best day. My balancing is not as sharp, possibly from yesterday's and the day prior of training. 5 to 10, whatever I have, that's fine. I'll grab it. It will do. And if I fall, that's fine. We can rebalance, go back up, and no worries. Came out to be a decent set, wasn't it? You never know, but at least I kept my standards high and I expected less. So now, when the set was decent, I'm actually thrilled. I'm content with the set. Whereas if I had a precise number, most of the time you will find yourself disappointed of you not being able to reach your expectations. And this mindset for the long term is problematic. And you hear from a lot of Olympic medalists, they participate in sports to the extent that they hate training. They just can't wait to retire. And we're training for life. It's slightly different. We want health and function to go along with performance, and we want physical improvements to go along with mental and emotional health, which is as important as the physical. As important as the physical, coming from someone who trained like a wolf by himself here in this garage, I would sacrifice anything in my life and my day to train, to complete the session, that 2 days, 6 days a week. Those of you who have done tedious movement practices that incorporate mobility, handstand, gymnastic style of straight arm, bent arm, strength, straight arm and bent arm training, and incorporated lower body strength work in addition to conditioning, you know how many hours, how many hours that's in a training week. I had training weeks of up to 30 hours of training. That's a job. A week, 30 hours a week of training, that's a job. I made it happen and now I'm happy because everything in relation to that for me is fun. Anything is fun. If I'm here starting my day with an hour or two of training in my pace, that's fun. That's how I want my day to start, to exist. So I have no problem with that. Five sets of handstand push-ups and the one-arm chin-ups are done. Stuck to sets of 4 repetitions with the one-arm chin-up and 5 to 8. 8 was the ceiling for that day with the handstand push-ups. Moving on, superset that really helps me attack 2 neglected areas. One is the low raises. So I feel that it works my delts differently, something that I rarely do. I have handstand push-up, I have barbell overhead press, but I have no other stimulus basically for the delts. Low raises are, I find, great overall mass developer, delt recruiter, because they also incorporate the full range of motion with the upper back and supersetted with pullovers. Pullovers are great to strengthen what I feel is the initiation of the one-arm chin-up. So where it's mostly the lats here up to the point where the elbow is close to the body, about 90 degrees, which you are at the strongest at. Usually most people will find that they are stuck about halfway or just 2/3 the way up. So when I work the one-arm chin-up, the top is my weakest link. I don't work the bottom half as much as I work the upper half when I solely focus on one-arm chin-up progressions. So I can tackle now the latissimus dorsi to strengthen my strength. Not just strengthen your weaknesses, but also compete with your strength. You want to actually develop what you're good at, so you bring it into the competition. Starting with the low raises. Okay. You want to keep the plates turned out. Don't pull them this way. Keep the shoulder internally rotated. As you pull up, as you bring the plates up, so more tension will be on the upper back, posterior and lateral deltoid. If you say, Rafael, I already saw you doing this superset, why bother? Well, it's exactly that. I do what I preach. So more frequently you find me do the same stuff, the stuff that I find beneficial, that targets my strengths and weaknesses, and not just a random collection of exercises to keep you entertained. This also targets the long head of the triceps, and the long head of the triceps is a weakness of mine, unlike the latissimus dorsi. It was therefore the most sore. It had the most soreness the day after practicing the dumbbell pullover on the previous session. Keep it light with the pullovers. It's an extreme range of motion, a lot of stress at the end range. So it works better with high repetitions, low load. Keeping the rest intervals very short, about 30 to 60 seconds, as I'm less focused on achieving a certain amount of repetitions per set. It's more about creating the fatigue, the metabolic stress in the muscles for a hypertrophy stimulus. When you work muscle groups, I don't really care about improving the loo raises. I perform the loo raises to improve my handstand push-up and improve shoulder health, range of motion. So I don't really mind being efficient or not efficient. At loo raises, it's just about the hypertrophy response, which can also be addressed using extremely low intensity, 30 rep maxes. And I don't even count reps. I know that I'm about 10 to 20 reps per set. So I'm good. If I can perform 10 reps per set, I'm working too heavy for my liking, for the hypertrophy section. And I go very close to failure, as I want to create a lot of fatigue in a short amount of time. So, to conclude the session, in my possibly last rest interval, it was a decent session, but those are often the most important sessions to show up to. It's one of the most important lessons that you can learn. Show up on days when you don't feel like to. Those actually comprise most of your training. The great training days are the exception. And the days that you have less time, desire, that's most of the training days. When you pull up, you should squeeze the shoulder blades together at the top. More chalk. So show up, whatever your level of advancement is. If you're a beginner, and I kid you not, I remember the days when my sessions were 3 sets. That was the full chest day. 3 sets of varied width and variations of push-ups in total. That was my full chest session. Prior to lunch, I performed that. But I executed with the same intent and seriousness as I execute nowadays 2-hour-long sessions. If you're a beginner, if you're an advanced, if you're intermediate, execute with intent, seriousness. Be deliberate with your practice, whether that's 10-minute sessions, whether that's elite sessions. Often people say, Raphael work, he trains elite athletes. He is very, very elite. I'm not an athlete. I'm a regular person. So am I. When I started doing some push-ups prior to lunch, more than a decade ago, I didn't think necessarily that I will end up pressing more than 100 kilograms overhead. But look where we got. So be deliberate, be intent. Be intense. Don't be afraid to be intense and decisive with your practice. And don't feel sorry for it. Execute. Take action. The name of the exercises, the amount of weight that you lift in the reps, they don't matter really. As long as you have it here. It's all here. See you on the next one.